All right, let's talk about something you do literally every day without even thinking about it: walking. Now, what if every single step you take is telling a story? The bigger question is, are we actually any good at reading that story? Let's find out. For ages, we've had this gut feeling, right? Shakespeare nailed it. I know her by her gait. We just feel like we can spot a friend from way down the street just by how they move. It feels like a signature, a part of who they are. But is that intuition actually correct? Or is this just another one of those things we think we're amazing at? Because when you actually put this assumption to the test, scientifically, the results are, well, they're genuinely shocking. And they tell us a ton about the gap between what we see and what we think we see. So to start, let's go somewhere where getting this right is, a matter of freedom or prison: the world of forensic science. People have been using Gait as evidence since way back in 1839 in London, all based on a witness saying, "I know him by his walk." But how reliable is that, really? Okay, so a really fascinating study led by a researcher named Ivan Birch decided to put this to the test. They basically set up this direct challenge. They took CCTV footage, had people dress identically to hide all their features, and then they asked two groups to play detective. You had your experienced, university-trained forensic gait analysts, and then you had a group of just regular folks, right? No experience. The task was simple. Can you match the suspect to the target? So who do you think was better? The experts with all their years of training, or just the average person relying on gut instinct? Yeah, the answer is definitely not what you'd expect. All right, so first up, the experts. They managed to correctly identify the walkers about 71.6% of the time. And you look at that and think, okay, not bad, right? That's way better than just guessing. You'd probably assume this is where the story ends. The experts proved their value, case closed. But then they looked at the results from the non-experienced group, and they were accurate 64.4% of the time. Now here's the kicker. When the researchers ran the numbers, they found that the difference between those two scores was not statistically significant. Meaning, in the eyes of science, the experts were basically no more accurate than anybody else off the street. So that just raises this huge question, right? If it's not raw accuracy that separates an expert from a regular person, then what is it? Well, the study dug a little deeper, and what they found is maybe even more important, especially when you're talking about a courtroom. And here is the big twist. The study also asked everyone to rate how confident they were on a scale of 1 to 5. The experts, they were pretty cautious, averaging a 2.4. But the regular folks, they were way more confident in their calls, with a score of 3.3. So think about that. They were no more accurate, but they were a lot more certain they were right. Now imagine that person on a jury. And it turns out the kind of mistakes they made were different too. The experts were a little more likely to miss a correct match, what's called a false negative. But the lay people, they were more likely to make a false positive. In other words, incorrectly pointing the finger at an innocent person. And that's the real danger, isn't it? It's not just about accuracy, it's that overconfidence combined with a higher risk of wrongful accusation. Okay, so using someone's walk to say that that is 100% the guy is shaky at best. So that brings us to our second big question. And this one's maybe a little more personal. What else is our walk saying about us? Not about our ID, but about, our inner world, and maybe even our vulnerability. So for this, let's look at a second landmark study. This one by Blaskowitz and Benel. They dove into this kind of unsettling idea of a victim walk, a way of moving that might signal to a potential attacker that you're an easy target. For decades, it's just been assumed that criminals can spot someone vulnerable just by how they move. Now, to test this the right way, the researchers had to strip everything away and isolate only the movement. So they used this really cool technology called a point light display. Just imagine someone dressed head to toe in a black suit, covered in little reflective dots, and filmed in total darkness. All you can see is the pattern of the dots moving. It gets rid of every other bias: no clothes, no age, no facial expressions. You are judging gait, and nothing but gait. And this is literally what the observers in the study saw. Not a person, not their clothes, not their face, just pure motion. It's like a walking skeleton made of light. This was how the scientists could be absolutely sure that any judgments people made were truly about the way the person walked. So first, they had experts analyze these point light videos for specific gait cues that have been linked to vulnerability in the past. Things like how long their stride is or how their body shifts. And the result was pretty clear. People who said they had a history of being victimized were way more likely to have a walk that matched this so-called vulnerable pattern. Now, for years, the assumption in this field has been pretty straightforward. If someone has a vulnerable walk, it's got to be an outward sign of what's going on inside, right? That they must have a shy or unassertive, maybe submissive personality. I mean, it seems logical, doesn't it? But as we're learning, logic and science don't always see eye to eye. So then, the researchers gave all the walkers a detailed personality test. And when they compared those personality results to the gait patterns, they found something that absolutely nobody saw coming. And this is the real paradox. The very same people whose walk was flagged as vulnerable and who also had a history of victimization, they did not see themselves as submissive. In fact, they were way more likely to describe themselves with personality traits like assured and dominant. Just let that sink in for a second. The walk that our brain might instinctively read as weak is actually connected to a person who sees themselves as strong. So, what on earth is going on here? Across two completely different studies, one in forensics, one in personality, we're seeing the exact same theme pop up. Our gut feeling, our intuitive ability to read a person's walk, is deeply and fundamentally flawed. Let's just recap this whole journey real quick. We assumed experts would be way better at identifying people by how they walk. Science found, nope, no real difference in accuracy, just a huge difference in confidence. We assumed a vulnerable walk meant a submissive personality. Science found it was actually linked to people who see themselves as dominant. In both cases, our intuition was flat out wrong. So here's the bottom line. The story of our gait isn't just about the signals we're sending out when we walk. It's about the flawed, biased, and often completely wrong ways our brains are interpreting those signals in everybody else. We are basically walking, talking, pattern recognition machines. But the patterns we think we see, they aren't always really there. And that just leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to chew on. If we can be so wrong about something as basic as the way a person walks, what other silent signals are we misreading every single day in all the people around us? Thanks for tuning in.